All right, no worries. Hi, everyone. So, thank you. Lani, thank you very much. Yeah, so it was a lot of great information there from Lani, especially on some of towards the end points on governance. So look, I've actually brought in a lot of slides. So I think about 730. So I've actually picked up on Lani's 5. So I'll just start whizzing through. So look, I wear a couple of different hats. So one of the companies I work with is called Vital Vectors, and what we do there is digital and social forensics. So we use open source intelligence methodologies to hunt people online. And hunting in certain areas. So we chase cyber bullies, we work to identify groomers in apps on some occasions. We work within the torturous and interference brand reputation area. And then we move into a couple of other areas, such as DARSEC, where we conduct security audits and tests on organisations. So I'm just going to try and really swing through. Let's take the... So, look, we also focus on trying to educate our clients and the general public on some of the things that are occurring online. From click fraud, funding nefarious activity offshore, through to Phoenix companies. And I tend to call this the cyber frontier sort of front line area. Normally, that's what you'll see for me online. Is just a Lego head, because I try and minimise my risk online because we've got a couple of kids and families. So threat intelligence is one of the big areas that we focus on, and a couple of years ago we were working with law enforcement to identify some of the hackers that exist in the marketplace. So who were they hacking, and what were they doing here in Oz? So we were able to then plot some of the guys that were fairly active across a broad spectrum, and get an idea of just who in their groups. And this is fairly big data. It was lots of data, lots of countries, because there's a lot of attacks that go unreported here in Oz, and you really don't know what they're attempting to do. But as Lani pointed out, they're seeking to actually sit and listen to what you physically do. So they actually come in and attack your system and sit there quietly. We've got a couple of clients that we've worked with recently where the hackers had been in for anywhere from 24 months to 8 months before they actually physically took action. So they were sitting in the networks, quietly listening, watching what you were doing, watching the habits that you had, how you were saving your backups, who your clients were, what your banking processes were before they physically acted. And when they did act, one of their clients was losing around $5,000 an hour. So they lost a couple of $100,000 in the space of a couple of days. And another client, we saw that they'd changed all their backups. So they physically nullified their backup systems. So they couldn't recover when they crypto locked their systems. And crypto locking means that they encrypt all the hard drives. So if they're targeting an accounting server, if they're targeting the desktops, they come through and encrypt it. That means you can't use it. They'll pop up a message saying, please pay me. And I think the largest amount that we've seen so far here in Australia this year has been $1.2 million to unencrypted from the hackers. Again, look, some of the activities that we do is we use big data to plot social relationships, to be able to identify people making threats to certain folks. Last year, I think we worked a case offshore to identify a fugitive on the run. But again, it was big data that we're using to identify those guys. So coming back to, can everyone hear me okay? So I've got one of those deep Malay voices. Oh no, mate, lots of that. I get my food lost there as well. So this is a case example of a network that we've just finished doing some work on about 6 months ago. So this particular network is a client that had 221 domains across 83 IPs, and they had 251 versions of malware across their network, effectively crippling not only their business, but their clients' businesses as well. So virtually unrecoverable, because they'd lost all their backup data, all their trading data, all their operational data, and on top of that, about 150 VoIP systems completely gone in the space of about 20 minutes once the hackers acted. And that's kind of a bit crazy. And it comes back down to some points that Lani made, that quite often we're not running governance practices when we're building our systems. So checking the software, having a look at our security practices, meeting privacy obligations, meeting consumer obligations, the Australian Consumer Act or the Corporations Act, because they all fit in to help us create better businesses and reassure our clients that we're doing the right thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I get a bit excited. So that's some of the hashes that we identified across the client's network. And look, it tends to work to it. Look, this is called the Harvard, not Boeing, the Lockheed Martin kill chain. So what the hackers will tend to do is they'll come in and do their recon. So they'll sit there and listen to your email or listen to your social channels. So they'll go and identify who to target in an organisation, and then they'll start an attack. That attack will be directed against your email services and against your website, with the end goal of getting into the four walls. Does that make sense? And in that process, they're collecting a lot of data. So that data might be every single user in the business. That might be every single friend you have in Facebook. Anyone you engage with in Instagram, they're collecting that data because there's weak links in those food chains. Does that make sense? Again, this is just an example of, like an IP that was actually spreading viruses out and infecting other sites here in Australia not so long ago, running out of WA that we identified. It went on to infect about 800 business websites in the space of 24 hours. But again, when we had a look, it was poor configuration, poor practices, and poor forward planning that enabled the attack to occur in the first place. Because most of us as business owners forget to look where we're going to do our hosting and say, how do you do that? How do you secure the website? How do you load a website onto a server? We don't ask those questions. And by not asking those questions, we open ourselves up to an attack. Does that make sense? A couple of years ago, look, this was one that really honed it in for me, was that has anyone heard of Hell's Pizza at all? Right, like, have you ever thought where they are now? They're down to one store here in Australia, and I think 2 stores in New Zealand. But they're a big company. I think they had 73 stores here in Australia, about 93 in the UK, and 115 in New Zealand. And again, look, when they got hacked and their CEO came out and said, hey, yeah, we've lost 230,000 records, but everyone gets hacked into and it's of no value to anyone. He didn't realise that what he was saying was that it may have been no value to him, but it would cost them, their company. Because Lani was talking about just before, that when an organisation gets hacked, it's either not there within 6 to 12 months or not there within 18 months at all. And that's the stats, it's consensus around the globe, whether the attack occurs here in Australia or whether the attack occurs in the States or Canada. If the organisation gets rolled, they generally not, and especially if they're a small, medium enterprise, they tend to be don't be around within 2 years. Oops. So at the moment, these are the stats of how many personal records have gone walkabout in the first half of this year. So we're over 500 million records, personal records that have been lost around the world. This year's been, really crazy in the amount of attacks that are occurring. So as you can see here, there's every 35 seconds there's a hack event. But what's really crazy is I think they're on target to take home $445 billion this year from identity theft alone, which is more than the GDP of US, Canada, China, Australia, and New Zealand combined. And it's been that way, since 2000. It's a growing pace, and it's something that's just been like doubling in some years and getting bigger. the reason for it is, again, that we generally have poor governance in play. We're not following up with security practices, and we're not requesting of IT, can you do your job better? Can you secure my services? Can you help me secure my startup? Can you write better code? So can you ensure that the code syntax is written correctly? Can you conduct some secure testing on the code? Does that make sense? So look, a couple of cases that we've been called into in Canada in particular have been brand reputation attacks, where a brand's been de-indexed from search. They've lost all their momentum, and it tends to start with negative reviews, black hat SEO tactics being conducted against the brand to push it over. But we all understand what social is. Look, we all have conversations on a daily basis, and that's what social enables a business to do, is have online conversations with their clients. But it's also able to push traffic and introduce new people to your brand, if that makes any sense. But it can also be sabotaged by the criminals and the dark arts. Does that make sense? Because ultimately it's a sort of, centralised, decentralised content sphere, and those are the channels that tend to be, most popularly used at the moment. When we've looked at some of the clients that we've been working with offshore, we've been able to identify networks or hubs of who's been attacking them. And quite often when a brand's getting attacked, we've been able to identify some of their competitors involved in the mix, where they've actually engaged people to write bad press posts or create bad backlinks or engage in bad social media tactics against the brand to hurt its reputation, to get action applied from a search engine that's not positive. Does that make sense? So this is a client that actually just got completely and utterly whacked. At one point they had around 27% of their market share, but they were completely and utterly dropped across all their brands. But their competitor, funnily enough, started trending upwards. So it was about taking them out of play so they could gain market share. And we've all heard of Purina and Benefold getting caught out last year by engaging in micro workers tasks to get people to search for the brand online. So for the Benefold brand to increase its rankings in search, to outperform some of the other of its competitor brands online. And this is the same sort of methodologies that we're seeing smart black hats and smart criminals use. Part of our processes include brand recovery with big data, but also what we call full spectrum digital marketing, so applied. So social media, organic on-page, pay-per-click display advertising, videos, etc. I'll just walk you through some factual stats that we've taken from some clients. So we worked with a couple of clients offshore in the plastic surgery industry. And what we're doing with the big data there, this is just one example site, was we looked at about 11 sites and we created an algorithm to identify all the questions being asked within the plastic surgery industry across the board in the US Canadian marketplace. That then enabled us to determine, based upon location, age and gender, what were the most popular procedures people were looking for. That way we were able to help our clients craft content to target their marketplace, but also help our clients work out who their personas were, who their users were, to be able to shape the conversation. Does that make sense? Yeah. It was a fair amount of effort. It took us about 8 months to collect the data that we wanted to pick up, and it took us another 5 months to shape it correctly. But we rebranded the clients from the ground up, changing their practices internally and externally, which then enabled us, when we relaunched, to begin a process that enabled them to grow. And we just increased the organic marketing that they were engaging on, initially with no online advertising at all. We brought that in at a later point, once we'd saturated buses and bus depots and external advertising. For that particular client, we're able to improve some of their basic metrics, which, you know, for most businesses, we're all looking for metrics and conversions, and that's our goal, is to try and get as many conversions as we possibly can, but that entails a conversation. Does that make sense? And a smart way of approaching the marketplace to engage with people. We conducted a couple of big data experiments last year, and Anne-Marie, you helped me put one of the presentations together, but this is one of the factual sites that we ran. So the experiment went from the 1st of February until March the 31st, and what we were shaping here was we were targeting purely the US marketplace to see how we could achieve certain results with big data. So we were testing headlines, we were testing written content, we were testing images, we were testing hyperlinks to be able to see, okay, well, look, just how much traffic can we get to a website and whether it would then convert, because we were looking to create what's called a curated content system. But as you can see here, we were getting some really weird, unusual results. A 24.84% bounce rate, which is really unusual within the industry. Most bounce rates sit around 50, 60%, sometimes higher. Average duration on site was almost 6 minutes, which again is wild. If we consider Perisher's time on site works out to be less than 30 seconds when they hit the site initially. It's when they get into the order system, that's when their time on site increases. Does that make sense? And these are the ways that we're using big data to work out what is the content our client base or our client's client base is hoping to target and what kind of works for them. Does that make sense? Because again, it sort of points to some of the revenue spends. We're working with another client at the moment who we started with them in January. It's been a long slog to rebuild all their systems, but they're on target at the moment to probably write about $2 million in sales. And they're targeting US Canadian marketplace. They're selling the world's largest organ, just so their product is for the skin. But and on average, the cost of the product is about $3,000. But the marketing that we're engaging in is pay-per-click landing pages. But the content has been crafted in the same manner that we produce for the plastic surgeons, by understanding what their users are looking for and sucking down all the big data, and then having a look at where are the users seeking to buy it? What are they hoping to engage? What's their ultimate outcome? Does that make sense? And then we're able to then shape that to begin a conversation. Does that make sense? All right, so look, I'd like to just finish, because one of the things that Lani was talking about was security there at the end. And at the moment, look, nothing's changed in the last 43 years when it comes to security, good practices, and making sure that you're doing the right thing from the get-go. The guy that wrote this is the co-inventor of the blue cable that normally hangs out the back of your computer, the Ethernet, Bob Metcalf. But he wrote this back in 1973. I use this to remind me that nothing has changed and we need to do the right thing on behalf of our clients each and every time we conduct an investigation. Does that make sense? Or help them secure their business. All right, does that, yeah? All right, well, thank you.